I'm super excited about this next session. Clinical trials are really, we have more than 8 trials open or opening soon. You can see looking here, these are just the trial sites that are already open. They're all across North America, and we're gonna have more sites being added to these maps as we go through the year. To get us started with our clinical trials panel, I'm going to give you Teresa Strong, who will give you a short introduction, and then we'll get right into the information. Just one last thing, another housekeeping item. If you have a young child and you're interested in the sleep session, it does not start until 9:45. It was a Shaf Yang breakout session, but it is generic, meaning it's going to be talking about apnea and sleep studies. So if that is something that it's important to you, it is open to both Prader-Willi and Shaf Yang folks, but it's not until 9:45. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and start this session.
Great. Thank you, Susan, and good morning, everybody. I'm very excited to be leading this or moderating this clinical trial panel. It's a really exciting time in PWS research. Even 5 years ago, we really had no new prospects for drugs to help our kids manage their hunger and their anxiety. And we're at a point now, I think, where there's a lot of potential pharmaceutical interventions that can really help our kids live long and healthy lives. But in order to see if those drugs are actually going to work in PWS, it's really up to us to learn about these clinical trials and see if we might enroll. I am always cognizant of the fact that my son, who's 24, he started growth hormone when he was 7, which at the time was very early for starting growth hormone. But the only reason that he had access to growth hormone was because some other mom and dad made the commitment to enroll in a clinical trial and help us learn that was something that was going to significantly impact the lives of people with PWS. So say a little bit of background. So I don't have time this morning, and it's a great thing because we have so many presentations. I want us to be able to get to those. So I don't have time to give you a little bit of background information about clinical trials, but fortunately we do have a lot of good resources that are available to you. On our website, last year I gave, and it's really not that long, so you don't have to listen to me for that long, but there's a 13-minute video on our clinical trials website that talks about the different phases of clinical trial, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and what is being accomplished in each of those phases, so you can have an idea of what stage each drug is at. It also talks about some of the orphan products. Art disease, Prader-Willi syndrome is considered an orphan disease, which gives some advantages for drug development as far as sometimes speeding up the drug approval process and things like that. So there's just a 13-minute sort of overview of that whole thing that's available on our clinical trials webpage. And then with Rob Lutz at the Prader-Willi Syndrome Association, he and I gave a webinar a few months back, also talking about the clinical trials that were upcoming, and also providing some resources. So where can I go about questions about my clinical trial? What questions should I be thinking of so that I can bring it to the doctor and make sure that I'm asking the right questions? That video is also available on FPWR's YouTube channel. We also have on our clinical trials website, you can download the slides, which point you to the various resources that may be useful in helping you evaluate whether you want to enroll your child in one of these clinical trials. So please feel free to access those resources. I will point you to the clinical trials page on the FPWR website. Susan's done a fantastic job of putting this page together. All of the active clinical trials and those that are about to start for PWS are up there. You can click through each trial to the clinicaltrials.gov website, which is the official website. That has all of the details for the clinical trials. As clinical trial sites open, they're going to go up on the map. One of the things We're really excited about all these clinical trials, but altogether it's going to be a lot of participants that are needed. And so one of the things that all of the companies are working on, and we're working with them, is to identify new trial sites so that these sites can be closer to you. So I hear rumors, for example, I'm in Birmingham, Alabama. I've heard rumors that there's perhaps going to be 2 clinical trials going on in Birmingham, because we've done clinical trials and it's been, driving hours or flying, and the more we can get these out into the communities, I think the better we'll be at enrolling them. So we're excited about the opportunity to do that and maybe bring these trials to people who haven't been able to participate previously. So there's that map that you need to keep an eye on. You can sign up for the clinical trials alert as new clinical trials come open. You'll get an email about that. You can download a fact sheet with frequently asked questions, again, so you have the resources to know what to ask and who to ask. And finally, Jessica talked about the PWS registry. If you enroll in there and you're eligible for a clinical trial, we'll send you out, and you click that we can contact you, right? You're in charge of that. If you click that we can contact you, we will send you information about clinical trials that you're eligible for. I would also remind you that on that clinical trial page, there's some non-drug studies, so interventions and opportunities to participate either in developing clinical trial endpoints or sending your child's poop to Andrea Hack to analyze so we can learn more about the microbiome. There's many, many ways to contribute, and many parts of your kid's body that you can contribute, including their poo. So please take a look at those. Some of these are very easy to participate in, and again, it's towards building general knowledge and looking at non-drug interventions for our kids. That's also on the clinical trial website. If you click on each of those studies, you'll get more information, including the contact information. And I'm not going to talk about the global registry because Jessica did such a great job, but I hope all of you will enroll in the global PWS registry. So finally, should I enroll my loved one with PWS in a clinical trial? And I would say that, that's a decision obviously only you can make, right? You need to speak with your personal doctor. You need to speak with the doctor at the clinical trial site so you understand the potential risks and benefits of any drug. And then you need to make the decision that's right for you, because it is a commitment. Many of these trials are, 16, 18, 20 weeks, and it's several visits. But it's a real way that you can be contributing to the community and contributing potentially to, a healthier life for your child in the long term. So I would charge you, we're not here to endorse any specific clinical trial, but what we are here to do is to offer you the information and encourage you to learn about it. So I would charge each of you with finding out if your child is eligible for a clinical trial, and if they are, then finding out about that clinical trial. So, taking those first steps of learning about it and seeing if it's right for you. So you'll have a lot of opportunities to hear about the different clinical trials that are in process and coming up. And our panelists, we can ask questions here, or they have booths set up so you can ask one-on-one questions as well. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. So first we'll invite Dennis Kim up to talk about Zafgen and their PWS research and development.
Okay. This is the thing that everyone's been having problems with? Great.
No, it's yours.
Thanks, Teresa. Good morning. I hope you guys are all feeling okay this morning. My name is Dennis Kim, and I'm the Chief Medical Officer for Zafgen. For those of you familiar with Zafgen, you guys have known us for a few years. But some of you that don't know us at all, we are a small biopharmaceutical company working on mostly complex metabolic diseases through inhibition of an enzyme called methionine aminopeptidase 2. What the enzyme is called is not very important. I think you will also see, though, however, we leverage that technology to try to address complex diseases like PWS and type 2 diabetes and other metabolic phenomenon. We are a bi-coastal company, even though we're headquartered in Boston. The clinical development group is close to here in San Diego. So we think we got the better end of that bargain, although we don't really have a football team anymore. It's been great to connect with many of you over the last day or two, including some of the organizers and scientists. And I want to take the opportunity to, of course, thank FPWR for the opportunity to speak, for the invitation. We love working with FPWR. I think they have a great staff, and we're eternally grateful to be able to work with such a great group all the time. When we first entered into PWS space, therapeutic area, a few years ago, we learned quite a bit. We didn't realize at the time, perhaps we underestimated just how complex the disease is, not only in molecular level, physiologic level, but also in the medical sense. Patients have lots of medical issues that come up, and although we were initially focused on hyperphagia and body weight, we've learned quite a bit about just how many more things there is to be addressed in the disease. We also didn't realize not only is the disease intellectually challenging, but we also didn't realize just how much the disease and the family and the community was going to impact us. And we've been inspired quite a bit by the community and the patients and the families. And it's been a driving force behind what we do every day at Zafgen. And we have a company-wide commitment to bring a new therapy forward for the disease. And I think it's an everyday phenomenon for us to make sure that we come up with and discover and develop an effective drug that is safe and can go a long way for everyone involved. So with that, let me introduce our product candidate, if you will, or drug candidate called ZGN-1258, which Dr. Fagan did an excellent job 2 days ago presenting in terms of our animal studies that we've done to date. Great. So methionine aminopeptidase 2 inhibitor, our lead compound for this indication called 1258, or ZGN-1258, it's designed to change the way the body senses stored energy, mostly in the form of adipose tissue or fat. Most of us carry enough adipose tissue to supply our energy source for a while. And in certain cases, we lose or have diminished ability to sense just how much stored energy we have. It's like driving a car and not knowing how much fuel you have in your tank. The drug appears to restore some of that energy sensing ability. And as a result, patients and animals that the drug is given to tend to eat less and lose body weight and use the stored energy, again, usually in the form of fat, to drive energy utilization. So advancing this new molecule for the treatment of PWS in the clinic, before we can get there, as you've heard, we have to do animal testing first. And we do animal testing to see the efficacy or effectiveness of the drug, as well as the safety of the drug. And what Dr. Fagan presented a few days ago, and also was presented in a poster session, are 3 different endpoints, if you will, of the drug and its effects on different animal models of Prader-Willi syndrome. We use models that others oftentimes use, such as MAGEL2 knockout mice, or OB mice, which is leptin-deficient mice, or diet-induced obesity model. All 3 models don't fit PWS perfectly, but in combination, perhaps they give us a better insight as to how the drug can help individuals with PWS eventually. So what we've seen through these studies is that there's consistent reduction of body weight and food intake across the 3 models, as well as improvement in certain behaviors that's sometimes observed in patients with PWS, such as anxiety, compulsive disorder behaviors, and obsessive tendencies. And then also importantly, what we've also demonstrated is that this drug candidate, 1258, although it retains a lot of the effectiveness of the prior compound that we were working on, called beloranib, it has a much improved safety profile comparatively. And we showed this, again, through the poster that Dr. Fagan presented, but also in many other models, such as dogs and in vitro systems that we've developed. So we're extremely excited about the potential of this drug and the ability to, or the prospect of moving it forward into patients in clinical trials, hopefully soon. I'm also going to share with you some information on PATH for PWS, which is a natural history study that we've just launched in collaboration with FPWR. And so I'll go into that in a little bit more detail in a few slides. But we do have a PATH for PWS booth right outside, so if you're interested in learning more, please stop by. And then there's also, of course, a website that you can also get information from. So it's important to test these drugs in animals first. And in the context of what we're doing here at Zafgen, what we wanted to do, our goal as of 2 or 3 years ago, and what we've been working tirelessly for the last 2-3 years, is to try to retain the efficacy of our prior molecule, but to improve the safety profile such that we have a lot more confidence going into the clinics. This is the data that we were able to garner after our phase 3 study was completed a few years ago, and it showed remarkable improvement in not only body weight, but also hyperphagic behavior as measured by HQ-CT. It was a phenomenal result, and patients and family members called us and emailed us quite a bit, asking about why the drug had to be to not become available anymore. And so it's one of the reasons that drove us to try to discover a safer alternative to this molecule. And 1258's highly improved safety profile, while retaining efficacy in animal models at least, of obesity and hyperphagia, has been very encouraging so far. But we, of course, have to prove that in humans as well. So switching gears, we talked about PATH for PWS in terms of natural history study. We're launching this study co-sponsored with FPWR to help us better understand the serious medical events that occur in patients with PWS as they live their lives. There is information available about some of the medical issues that come up through the natural progression of the disease or history of the disease, but it is somewhat deficient, and we want to buttress that gap. We also are evaluating how PWS-related behaviors and hyperphagia change over time, and this will hopefully help inform us develop and run better clinical trials and design these trials for potential new treatments, including 1258, but also for other potential therapies as well. The study is conducted through the global PWS registry, and individuals can participate in this trial or study while enrolled in other therapeutic studies. They're still eligible to enroll here. This was an important point for us because oftentimes when you're enrolled in one clinical study, you're usually precluded from participating in other studies. But we want to take all comers. And one other important thing to point out is that this is just an observational study. So there's no therapy given, no intervention given. We're just going to ask you to fill out some questionnaires on a periodic basis so that we can tell if you're having trouble, if you're doing better, what medications your patients or your kids may be taking, and how that may be changing over time. So the eligibility criteria highlights are on this slide. So diagnosed with PWS, age 5 and above, lives in US, Canada, or Australia, and that's because you need to be English speaking. We haven't been able to go so far as to be able to translate things in other language for the questionnaires that's in the study, but hopefully one day. Be enrolled or willing to enroll in the global PWS registry. Internet access is a must because this is how the information is going to be gathered all through the web. So there's no actual clinical site visits. You can do all of this out of your home on your office, wherever you have your internet access. Enrollment begins next week on October 10th, so it's timely that we're all here, because I think this will really help us leverage all the people that's sitting in this audience here and the exchange of information that we have. The website is www.pathforpws.com, and you can contact us through the email address that's listed here. So thank you for your attention. I enjoyed meeting many of you yesterday, and some of the organizers, of course, and breaking bread with you. It was fun to let your hair down a little bit last night. Probably didn't need to, see some of you dance, but it's all good. So thank you. Yeah.
So I will mention that official enrollment into Path for PWS is October 10th, but we have special super secret pre-enrollment, which is really the same as enrolling here. So we have iPads out there. If you're interested in enrolling for Path for PWS, we can help you get through that consent process and get things rolling. So please feel free to go to the Path to PWS booth out there and start the enrollment process. Dennis didn't mention that there's a little gift card after you fill out all of the surveys. So that's a little bit of a reward for your time and for the investment of your effort in pulling the records together. So great. Next, we'll talk about a phase 3 study of diazoxide from the company Soleno. It's tricky in the back.
I don't fall, right?
Right.
All right, hi, I'm Jennifer Abuzahab. I'm a pediatric endocrinologist from Children's Minnesota, and I really want to thank the FPWR and for the opportunity to share some of the information about this new trial, and also for all of your attention and willingness to participate in a variety of trials that are going on, because I really feel like it is a really exciting time for research for Prader-Willi. I've been a peds endo in Minnesota now for 18 years and have patients that I've watched grow up and throughout the years, and it's just really fun to have things that are on the horizon that can potentially help, and just to get more answers, I think. For me, that's the biggest part of research, is to get answers. So this study is looking at diazoxide choline controlled release, or DCCR. I'll refer to that the rest of the time. And really, this is a drug that we've used in pediatrics for children with hyperinsulinism for a long time, so we recognize the safety profile of it. This is a controlled release tablet, so it's a little bit different formulation, but of a drug that we know. And to think about why we use this drug, I'm just going to go into a little bit about some of the hormones and integration pathways in the hypothalamus. And so I think when you think about all the hormones that run around your body, I like to think of them as text messages maybe, and the hypothalamus itself is sort of the LTE network that integrates all those text messages and helps you decide feeding and energy and behaviors and pull them all together in a cohesive fashion. And really, we're going to focus today on a very small part of the very small hypothalamus, or probably the arcuate nucleus, and neuropeptide Y and a agouti-related protein interactions and how they regulate feeding and energy balance. And so we know that these are appetite stimulatory neuropeptides, and that the arcuate nucleus is very important for integration of all the other peripheral satiety and appetite hormones, and how you integrate all of those peripheral signals into the coordinated balance of how hungry you feel and how much energy you're expending. We know that Prader-Willi patients have a loss of the SNORD116, or small nucleolar RNA CD box 116, so you know why we name it SNORD. That's a paternally imprinted gene. It's lost in patients with Prader-Willi syndrome, and by losing that, then they have higher NPY expression, and that's part of the hyperphagia and behavior problems that are seen in Prader-Willi. We know that these proteins are also regulated by the potassium ATP or KATP channels, and because diazoxide affects those channels then, it affects the secretion of neuropeptide Y and AGRP in the arcuate nucleus, and then will decrease the secretion of those peptides, and therefore decrease hyperphagia, improve fat and probably or hopefully improve behaviors as well. Oops, sorry, I went too far. So the primary objective for this study, now in phase 3, is to look at the change in hyperphagia from the baseline to visit 7, so over the course of the 15-week study. And this is the 9th study, so there have been 8 prior studies using this compound and a total of 210 patients in total in the previous studies. The secondary objectives of the study to really look at the changes in body fat mass, so looking at DEXA scans prior to enrollment and then at visit 7, and then the changes in global impression scores from the caregiver to look at the other markers or pieces of this integrative pathway to see if there are changes in behavior, in obsessive tendencies, and maybe even aggression tendencies or just the obsessiveness. This is, again, a 15-week study. Our goal is to enroll 105 patients. There are currently 6 centers that are up and running, and there are an additional 10 centers that will be starting. It is a randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled, parallel arm study, so none of us know whether your child would be on the drug or on the placebo. The first 6 weeks is important because there's a dose titration. We know that slow titration of this medication decreases the side effects and improves the safety of the medication. And then patients who complete the 15-week study then are enabled to enroll in a 9-month open label extension study. And there's already been 1 patient now who is enrolled over, so is now finished the full 15-week study and is now in the open label study. And it is just a tablet once a day. So that's the administration. And you can see in the bottom here the sites that are open and then the sites that will be coming soon. So maybe one will be near you. And these are the exclusion and exclusion criteria. Just again, a brief overview of what a study is looking at. So we're looking at patients 4 years of age and older for inclusion. They do need to be able to swallow a tablet, and they need to have genetically confirmed Prader-Willi syndrome, be hyperphagic, and then because of the questionnaires that we're doing to look at behavior changes, and be in a stable care setting with the same caregiver or a consistent caregiver for 6 months who can complete those surveys. The exclusion criteria really is a weight less than 30 kilos and or greater than 135, again, because of the preparation of the tablets and the dose per kilo, that's the weight restrictions. And there are some prohibitive medications, really just looking at things that could inhibit CYP450 because that's how diazoxide is metabolized. And any other anti-obesity medications are excluded throughout the trial for 3 months prior to and then completely during the trial, as well as any weight loss procedures such as gastric bypass. And any medications that are known to prolong the QTC interval, systemic steroids, and any investigational drugs or devices, again, just for the 3 months prior to the study and then during the study. And then that is my brief overview. So if people have questions, I just want to thank you for your time and for listening.
So I think for the sake of time, maybe we'll wait till all the presentations have happened, and then we can ask questions. That's good. I got it. Thank you. So our next talk will be Soraya Arias talking about the drug from Melendo Therapeutics, the Volatide. That's how you say it, right? The back and the pointers right there.
So, good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for the invitation and the opportunity to speak today. My name is Soraya Alas, and I am leading the clinical development of a new drug called Volatide that is being tested for the treatment of hyperphagia and food-related behaviors in patients with PWS. So it is a very great pleasure for me to be here today with you. I've been at some family conferences in the past few years, talking about this compound and giving update and showing data from the early work that we have been doing with the drug. We have tested the drug in various study populations, including in patients with PWS. And we are today at having very exciting times, actually, as we are preparing next step. And next step is a large clinical trial that's going to be a long-term treatment clinical trial, international clinical trial with patients from North America and Europe. And I hope that today I will be able to transmit all the enthusiasm that we are having in the preparation of this clinical trial. A few words about us. For those of you who do not know us, we are Milando Therapeutics. We are a biopharma company. We are developing drugs for the treatment of endocrine disease with a special focus on rare disease. And we are a team of about 30 people. Some of us are based in the US, and some of us are based in France. As an introduction to the drug, I wanted to say a word about ghrelin. This is something maybe you've heard. Ghrelin is a hormone that everybody has. It has the particularity to be present in the blood in two forms. There is the acylated form and the unacylated form. And the difference between the two, chemically speaking, is just a little thing that permits acylated ghrelin to bind to some receptors in the brain. However, these two drugs have very different biological effects. So acylated ghrelin is the hormone that stimulates appetite. And the opposite, actually, unacylated ghrelin is able to inhibit the effect of acylated ghrelin on appetite. Acylated ghrelin has also some other biological activities. It is also the hormone that permits fat deposition and that actually increase glucose levels, whereas unacylated ghrelin actually is doing the opposite. So why are we talking about ghrelin in PWS? Because very quickly after the discovery of ghrelin, actually ghrelin is a very new hormone. It has been discovered only 20 years ago, and 20 years is new in medicine. So when the hormone has been discovered as a hormone that stimulates appetite, and knowing that hyperphagia symptoms are present in PWS, people were curious to look at levels of ghrelin in PWS. And at that time, actually, the only assay that was available was an assay that was able to measure total ghrelin. So we were not able to measure both forms of ghrelin. However, it was very clear that ghrelin levels were elevated in PWS. So when these assays become available that could distinguish between the two forms of ghrelin, acylated form and unacylated form, some studies and some data came up, and it was actually pretty, in the past few years, I would say, few studies have been published, and a large study has been published recently in 2016, clearly showing that the form of ghrelin that is elevated in PWS is acylated ghrelin. So it's not surprising because it is the hormone of appetite. On the other side, unacylated ghrelin levels are not necessarily elevated when you look at all patients. However, when you look across time and across different ages and what we call nutritional phases, it is very clear that something is happening when hyperphagia and obesity develop. And this something is actually a drop in levels of unacylated ghrelin. So because acylated ghrelin are elevated in PWS, because unacylated ghrelin is able to inhibit the effect of acylated ghrelin with respect to stimulation of appetite, and because there is this drop in unacylated ghrelin when hyperphagia developed, all these observations were the basis of our rationale to intervene with unacylated ghrelin, and we thought giving unacylated ghrelin to patients could have some benefits. So our drug is actually a part of unacylated ghrelin. This is not the whole hormone. The whole hormone has 28 amino acids. This is this little circle in blue that you can see, and our drug is part of it. It is 8 amino acids, and we have made the drug cyclic in order to have it in the blood longer. So this is important to have that in the blood longer in order to maximize the biological effects of the drug. So it is a first in class. It means that it is first compound of its category. It is given once a day, and it is given by subcutaneous injection. So what have we done so far with levoletide? This has already been tested in humans. This is what I mentioned in my introduction. We have done studies in healthy volunteers. This is the way to start clinical development. You test that in healthy volunteers. We have done also the drug, we have tested the drug in other study populations, and this includes obese subjects and patients with type 2 diabetes. And we have also performed a small study in patients with PWS. So overall, the drug up to 2 weeks of administration has been well tolerated, so this is important. We have noticed no serious adverse event. And we were able also to show some improvement in what we call metabolic parameters, basically reduction in weight in obese subjects, also some reduction in blood glucose in obese subjects as well. And in patients with PWS, we were able to show some improvement in hyperphagia and food-related behavior. So that was this study that was performed in Europe. We had 3 countries participating to the clinical trial. We had France, we had Italy, and Spain. A total of 47 patients. Half of them were on the drug, and the other half on placebo. So the drug was shown to be safe and was shown to improve hyperphagia and food-related behaviors. In addition to that, we were able also to see some reduction in fat mass, and we were also able to show some decrease in waist circumference. There was no effect on body weight. It was a short-term study, 2 weeks of administration only. So next step is this study that is going to start fully in early 2019. So this is a large study. There will be 3 arms, 3 months administration where 2/3 of patients will get the drug, 2 different doses, and 1/3 of patients will get the placebo. And after 3 months, for 9 months, everybody will get the drug. So it is a total of 12 months treatment. We're going to have 150 patients, and as I mentioned, it's going to be a global study, so international study with sites in the US and in Europe. In terms of endpoints, what are we going to look at? After 3 months, we're going to look at hyperphagia, and the way we're going to look at that is through a questionnaire. This is something maybe that some of you have heard. This is what we call the hyperphagia questionnaire. This is a tool that has been validated to be used in clinical trial. We're going to look also at some metabolic parameters such as weight, fat mass, waist circumference, and also some other parameters as part of safety assessment. So the second part of the study, so the 9 months extension period, this is important to have this extension period in order to be able to show some effects to see if the drug, the effects are maintained over time. It is also very important in order to assess safety. so long-term safety. So this is important to have this 9 months as extension. And finally, patients who are going to participate to this clinical trial should have, so the age is 8 to 65. They should have a single primary caregiver. This is very important. The person is going to fill out the questionnaire. So this is a person that is caring for the patient. Patients with or without type 2 diabetes are allowed to participate to the study as long as their HbA1c is lower than 10%. There is no exclusion criterion with respect to weight or BMI. We are excluding only very, very obese patients. And finally, growth hormone treatment is going to be permitted if doses are stable. So this is basically our study that we hope to, again, to start early in 2019 with sites open in the United States. And I would like to thank you very much for your attention.
Okay, I skipped one, sorry. We'll go back to, let's do insights, and then we'll go back to Levo. So sorry, I don't have my glasses on, but we'll do insights, thank you. And we are fairly time constrained, and so people can come talk individually, so yeah. Let's see.
Okay.
So forward and back. And
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be with you today. My name is Ahmed Al-Kashif. I'm the VP for Clinical Development at INSYS. INSYS is a small pharmaceutical company focusing on THC medicinal indications, also spray technology. We very much appreciate the foundation giving us invitation to come and talk to you about our clinical trial, which I'm going to go over in the next few slides. We make synthetic CBD, which is very different from out there in the market. It's 99.5% pure, and it is made according to FDA and good clinical manufacturing procedures. It has a strawberry flavor, and there's a little bit of sugar in it, and the total calories from taking the dose is about 7.02, so it's very negligible. We started a study to assess the efficacy of CBD in PW. And I just want to say that I'm really touched by being in the meeting for the first time and seeing families and all the work that you're doing. You should be all very, very proud for advancing the science for the benefit of your children. This is just remarkable. So the primary objective of the study is assessing hyperphagia, and the secondary objectives are going to be the reflection of that on the weight and weight change and the body fat and so forth. This is a double-blind, randomized, 1-to-1, so your child have a 50% chance of being on CBD or placebo. The sample size is 66 patients. The duration is about 15 weeks, the treatment, but including screening, and there is a two-week placebo run-in at the beginning and then a month follow-up at the beginning. So it might go up to about 22 weeks or 21 weeks. So far, we have 10 centers. They're all in the U.S. One site is up and running already in Washington State, and a few sites have gotten their IRB approval and getting ready to start, about 8 sites. It takes a little longer to get the sites initiating and up and running because CBD is still a Schedule I drug by DEA standards and FDA, so it takes a while to get all the licensing and the approval to use it for investigational trial. However, another company, GW Pharmaceutical, have already gotten first approval for their CBW for Dravet syndrome, which is another rare disease, epileptic type disease. And for that reason, CBD was rescheduled to Schedule 5, which is really, really good news. However, ADA said still for investigational purposes it will remain as Schedule 1 until FDA approves it for that indication. Brief about the inclusion criteria, exclusion criteria. The patient age is 8 to 17. Diagnosis of Prader-Willi will be, if it's not made already, it will be done with the genetic testing that is required. There is a list of eligibility criteria that you can see in details on the clinicaltrials.gov, or if you stop on the booth, we have information to give you about inclusion and qualifications for the trial. And of course, with the multiple visits and the longer duration of the study, it's considerable undertaking on the family part, so you have to comply with all these visits and data collection. This is a map of where our sites are. The green site there is the one that's already started, and the other sites in red, they are in the process of getting ready to start. We have a few more sites to also initiate and incorporate. So if you see a site on the map in the state where you live, by all means, feel free to contact them. We, again, grateful for the foundation for including all the information on the foundation site as well, with details, contact number of investigators, phone numbers, emails, so you can get this information from the either foundation or the clinicaltrials.gov. And I'd like to introduce my colleagues, Joviani De Castro, who is running the trial with Ashley Lockhart. They're sitting right there, and they're going to be in the booth, so feel free to introduce yourself and get more information. Behind them is our Senior VP, Mr. Steve Sherman. With that, I'll stop, and we'll see if you have any questions at the end. Thank you.
Okay, you guys you're hanging in like troopers. Okay, here is the talk about carbetocin, a phase 3 study.
Okay, thank you, Teresa. My name's Davis Ryman. I'm a neurologist and a geneticist currently working with the team at Levo Therapeutics. So we'd like to thank FPWR for inviting us to present an update on our planned phase 3 study of an investigational medicine called carbetocin, which is scheduled to begin later this year. So I'll try to present to you some brief background about carbetocin and also some results from the completed phase 2 study, which was completed in 2014, and then an overview of the plans to move forward with the phase 3 study later this year. So as a disclosure, I am an employee of Levo Therapeutics. So to begin, I'd like to give you a brief overview of what carbetocin is and some of the reasons that are motivating us to continue developing it as a potential treatment for PWS. So carbetocin is what's called an oxytocin analog, which means that it's a man-made molecule that's designed to be very similar to oxytocin, which is a normal hormone present in the brain. So as you might have heard, and also seen at some of the other sessions in the scientific day, if you were there. Oxytocin has been an area of great interest in PWS research because it has multiple normal functions that are relevant to behaviors often problematic in individuals with PWS. So, for example, it's very important for control of appetite, and it has roles in social and emotional behaviors, anxiety, and obsessive compulsive symptoms. It's been shown that individuals with PWS have decreased number of oxytocin-producing neurons in their brain. So it's our hope that delivering or restoring some of the absent or deficient oxytocin function with this oxytocin analog might address some of those behaviors. I'd also like to point out that carbetocin was designed to be more selective to specifically binding to those oxytocin receptors and not binding to other receptors in the brain, such as vasopressin receptors. So we hope that might additionally be a strategy to potentially limit off-target side effects resulting from the therapy. Interestingly, there is some clinical experience previously with the use of an intravenous formulation of carbetocin. So the intravenous carbetocin has actually been approved in 90 countries outside the US for a different use to prevent bleeding following cesarean delivery, and there's been good safety experience with that use. However, of course, the intravenous injection on a daily basis wouldn't be feasible for ongoing treatment of PWS, so an intranasal formulation was developed by Ferring Pharmaceuticals, which involves intranasal spray 3 times a day before each meal. And so a phase 2 study of that intranasal dose form of carbetocin was completed in 37 individuals with PWS. So I can tell you a little bit about the safety and efficacy results from that study, and it motivated us to continue now with a larger and longer phase 3 study of this intranasal carbetocin in children with PWS. So here are a table of the safety results from the phase 2 study I mentioned. So this was a study of 37 individuals with PWS who are aged 10 to 17, I believe, and it was a relatively short study that involved 14 days of treatment, but it appeared relatively well tolerated during that study. This is a table of what's called the treatment-emergent adverse events, or basically any adverse reaction or bad medical occurrence that was reported for the participating patients, and here is presenting all of the events occurring in 5% or more of the patients. The most common event reported was actually headache. That occurred in 5 patients receiving carbetocin and 6 patients receiving placebo, so it didn't appear significantly different. There were other events reported, such as medication error, 1 report of abdominal pain in each group, a conjunctivitis or pink eye infection, 1 episode of diarrhea, and then this dysgeusia means like a metallic taste. There didn't appear to be any concerning differences between the groups or any reasons to believe that carbetocin would not be tolerated, which motivates further development as a potential treatment. Here are some efficacy results also from that study. So you can see in orange the results from the group treated with carbetocin, and in blue the results from patients treated with placebo. So on the axis is shown this hyperphagia questionnaire score. So this was an 11-item questionnaire measuring a lot of hyperphagia behaviors and parents' reports of food-related behavior and hunger. So there was a significant decrease in this score it was apparent as early as day 8 and continued to be maintained at day 15 of this study, which was significantly different and a greater reduction in hyperphagia symptoms than the placebo-treated patients. Here are some other secondary endpoints or other questionnaires or scales that they assessed in this phase 2 study. They looked at this scale called the SIBOX, which stands for the Children's Yale-Brown Obsessive Compulsive Scale. So it measures a lot of obsessive compulsive behaviors, including skin picking and repetitive questioning, which can be a big issue as well for PWS patients. This also showed a significant improvement in carbetocin compared to the placebo group. The Rice Profile Food Domain is another scale scale of hyperphagia or food-related behaviors, which also showed a significant benefit for carbetocin relative to placebo. And the CGI-I is a scale that allows the clinician to have a overall assessment of how they feel the overall symptoms of PWS are doing. That was also significantly more improved in carbetocin treatment. And the version of the hyperphagia square rated by the clinician was also showed that's the consistent significant benefit. So in view of the positive apparent efficacy findings and encouraging safety and tolerability data from this phase 2 study, it motivates us to continue with a larger and longer phase 3 study to confirm and extend those results in a larger set of PWS patients. If you'd like to see the full results of that phase 2 study, they were recently published in JCI Insights this summer, and they can be available on our website at levotx.com. So here is an overview of our planned phase 3 study. So we hope to enroll approximately 175 patients at sites across the US and Canada. And this will be a placebo-controlled randomized trial that will involve an 8-week placebo-controlled period. So in other words, on entering into the study, the participant would be randomly assigned to get either one of 2 dosage levels of the carbetocin or potentially receive an inactive saline placebo nasal spray for that 8-week period. So after that 8-week period is complete, patients will be reassigned, so they'll all be receiving active carbetocin throughout the remainder of the study, and they'll be continued to be followed up for safety and efficacy for a total of 56 weeks. So some of the efficacy and safety endpoints or scales that we'll be monitoring in this study include the hyperphagia questionnaire, assessing hyperphagic symptoms, which is rated by the parent or caregiver. Also the SIBOX questionnaire that I mentioned, assessing obsessive-compulsive symptoms, the global impression of overall symptoms in PWS, and additionally this new scale called the PADQ, or PWS Anxiety and Distress Questionnaire. So as you might know, our CEO, Sarah Cotter, is actually a parent of a daughter with PWS, and she's been working with the FPWR to develop and validate this scale for inclusion in our study, and she'll be speaking about that later today. And we're also including the Food Safe Zone questionnaire, which is an assessment of all of the accommodations that caregivers have to make around food in their home to compensate for the hyperphagia behaviors. We'll also be assessing safety throughout the study with physical exams, monitoring of adverse events, and laboratory tests. So some of the principal inclusion and exclusion criteria are, we're going to include patients who are from 7 to 18 years old inclusive. They'll need to have a confirmed genetic diagnosis of PWS. There's no restriction on the particular subtype that they have to have. They'll have to meet the criteria for what's called a nutritional phase 3. So this was a definition developed by Dr. Miller in Florida, which basically means they have to be significantly hyperphagic and rarely feel full and have some significant hyperphagia at baseline. Some exclusion criteria: we couldn't enroll patients who are in a group home because their parent or caregiver would need to be able to report on how they're doing throughout the study. We would like to avoid any new food-related changes or environmental restrictions before entry into the study, and any recent changes in concomitant medications, and ongoing use of medications like growth hormone is allowed. Also, they could not have participated in a different research interventional study in the 6 months prior to entry into this study. So in summary, this is a planned phase 3 randomized controlled study that we hope will extend and confirm the promising safety and efficacy findings that we observed in the phase 2 study. We have an ambitious goal to recruit 175 participants, and are going to be starting up possibly 20 or more sites across the US and Canada. It'll enroll patients aged 7 to 18. I'd like to also point out we have no restrictions on weight or BMI, because we understand that many PWS patients might be of normal weight because of intensive efforts at environmental control, but they still would have significant symptoms of needing treatment. So after the initial 8-week placebo-controlled period, all patients will receive active treatment for the remaining long-term follow-up period. And we'll be assessing change in hyperphagia, obsessive-compulsive symptoms, and anxiety. So if you'd like to follow preparations for the study as it starts up, you can follow our website at levotx.com, and there's a link to the clinicaltrials.gov page that can also notify you of each local site as it becomes activated. So with that, I'll thank you and take questions in the panel.
And finally, whoops. Susan, do we have the GLWL slides on here? I've got them on a jump drive. It does not seem to want them.
Wow, look at that. Would you mind putting up the thing? There we go.
I've got them on a jump drive.
I've got everything backed up. Is it playing? Okay, there you go.
Okay, great. We're good. GLWL is another company that is present here today and has an ongoing clinical trial, and they've asked me as a patient advocacy representative to present some of their the trial parameters, but they're here to answer questions if you'd like. So Carol in the back, yes. This is a overview of GLWL's ongoing clinical study to assess the efficacy of GLWL-01 compared to placebo in hyperphagia-related behaviors in PWS. So this drug is also targeting the ghrelin, that hunger hormone that is elevated in PWS. So it's attacking that pathway using a different approach compared to Melindo's drug, for example. But same pathway, we know ghrelin is high in PWS. We know ghrelin's important in driving hunger. And the question that we're asking here is if we can interrupt that pathway or decrease those ghrelin levels, will it have an effect on hyperphagia? And this is going to be measured using the HQCT, which is the hyperphagia scale that many of the companies are using. That was originally developed by Elizabeth Dykins. So the primary objective is to look at hyperphagia. The secondary objective is to look at the safety and tolerability of the drug, to assess the efficacy as assessed by the overall and global impression of change, and also to look at the pharmacokinetics. So how is the drug metabolized and how does it stay and be secreted from the body? There's additional objectives, which is to evaluate Dr. Soraya talked about the acylated ghrelin versus the unacylated ghrelin and how that balance between the two is really important in driving hunger or not driving hunger. And so this study will also look at that ratio. We'll also look at the body weight of the individual, change in body weight, change in fat mass, change in BMI, and weight circumference, and also look at some blood chemistry about changes in the cholesterol and other markers of lipids in the blood. So this is like many of the other studies, it's randomized, it's double-blind, which means nobody knows who's getting drug. It's a placebo control, so it's a comparison of drug to placebo, but this is a crossover, so everybody gets drug. Some people get drug, then placebo, some people get placebo, then drug, but everybody gets drug. And the study is designed for 34 patients with PWS, and the duration is for 18 weeks. So this is a phase 2 study, so it's sort of somewhat shorter and a sort of a medium-sized number compared to phase 1 or phase 3. So the inclusion and exclusion criteria, so this is for males and females over the age of 16 who have a confirmed diagnosis of PWS. The BMI is quite a broad range of BMI, so 27 to 60, that's kind of a little bit overweight to obese. And they're looking for the individual to have a pretty stable body weight coming into the clinical trial. And again, like I think all of the clinical trials, the person must have a caregiver who is familiar with their behavior, who is able to accurately fill out the hyperphagia questionnaire. And because of that, it's not really often going to include individuals who are living in a group home, individuals who have recently been in a different clinical trial or had a different weight loss agent that they might have used, and individuals with type 1 diabetes. Or if the caregiver can't do the HQCT, that's another exclusion criteria. So this clinical trial is currently enrolling. I believe they have about 8 or 10 slots left to enroll, and they're enrolling in the US and in Canada, 3 sites in Canada, so are my Canadian friends, and in the US. Again, this is an ongoing study, and you can talk with Dr. Fortier about it. So with that, we come to the end of this session. I think we may have a few minutes for questions. We're kind of running short, but again, all of these individuals will be, and their companies will be represented to ask questions. If there are general questions, that we can take a few of those now before we break.
I heard from the presentation that once the patient are done with the study, they can continue for a certain amount of time that they're getting the medication itself. My question is, by the time the medication has been given to the patient, how does it work? Does the FDA approve it right away so that the patient can continue it? Because my concern is the adverse effect or the weaning once the kids is not on medication. So I want to know, are they going to continue it, or once you guys stop giving the medication, we have to wait for the FDA to have it approved? Does it make sense?
So I'll just say, terminology-wise, if the study says it's an open label, that usually means you can extend, continue to give the drug, and it varies company to company. So does anyone want to make a comment about the? So after a phase 3 study, the companies will usually submit, if they believe that the drug has been safe and effective, they'll submit that to the FDA, and it takes up to a year for the FDA to review all that information and approve or not approve a drug, and that's, so anyone else want to comment on that? Or
No, that's exactly right. It's on. Hello? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right. So that's exactly right what Teresa said. It takes several months, maybe even longer, for the FDA to review your application once you've finished clinical testing. Usually that follows phase 3 trials. So many of these trials that you saw today are in phase 2 stage, which means in most cases, there'll be another phase of testing that's necessary before the FDA will look at your application. So depending on where the drug is in this development process, your child with PWS may be receiving drug all the way through if there's an open label extension, like Teresa said, or there may be interruption in that treatment, but it really is individual case. It differs for each case.
So that's an important question to ask when considering each of these. Will there be an open label extension, and how long is that open label extension? Any other questions?
So just to follow on that, in your experience, how long does it take then for insurance companies to cover new medications? And is there something that we should be doing to help coordinate that process? Because as I'm sure everybody in the room knows, fighting with insurance companies to cover things is a painful and very time-consuming part of our lives.
So if I can make a comment about that. So Natalie talked yesterday about the PWS Clinical Trial Consortium, and one of the objectives, the objective is to facilitate all of these clinical trials for PWS, but we're also cognizant of the fact that once a drug is approved, we are going to have to deal with the insurance side. And so we're trying to lay the groundwork for that. For example, we're working, there's a poster over there, we're working to what is the impact of PWS on families, so we can get an indication of that. What are the quality of life issues. All of that information is important for establishing that the insurance companies will pay. And I don't know if others want to comment on that as well. Yeah. Yes.
Is it on? Hi. I'm at multiple meetings. Yesterday I was at a meeting, I don't want to misquote the meeting that I was at, Rare Access to Critical Therapy Summit yesterday in Irvine, which was a combination of the Child Neurology Foundation and Global Genes. And one of the topics that we discussed yesterday was trying to work together, and Teresa and I spoke about this a little while ago, trying to work together for rare diseases. To one of the things that we noticed yesterday, insurance companies weren't at the meeting yesterday, and we were all wondering, well, I'd say something. We just tried to wonder where they were, and we also noticed legislators weren't at the meeting yesterday. And I know next week Ahmed's going to a meeting at NORD, and I'm hoping that that's one of the discussions that we have there, is because as a pharmaceutical company, when we develop drugs, and if we can show that they have impact on people's lives, we don't want it to get hung up at the insurance company too. So this is one of the initiatives I think that we're all working together to try to resolve. And hopefully as a group we'll make a consortium of rare disease foundations that can work together to make sure that government and insurance companies aren't roadblocks to getting therapies to patients.
My question is about the CBD. Is the formulation going to be like a mega dose of what a person could not replicate with the legal way of administering? Does it need a higher dose, and does that affect the ghrelin?
Okay. No, it's those we are using here. We are currently using in 2 trials in epilepsy in children, and I should have said something about this, but it's very, very safe. The side effects we've seen are not serious and very mild, and mainly a little bit of somnolence and some GI disturbance. But aside from that, really, it's very well tolerated. We don't exactly know if there is a relationship between the cannabinoid system where CBD and THC, which is marijuana, work in the brain and how that interact with the ghrelin system. But we think CBD would work because I should have said first that the CBD is not THC. It's exactly the opposite if you think about it, for those who don't know. And it actually blocks marijuana effects on the nervous system. So marijuana makes you eat THC. CBD is exactly the opposite, and it counteracts that effect. So this is why we think it might help with hyperphagia and obesity in general. It works on the CB1 receptors centrally in the brain as inverse agonist, which is another way of saying it's a mild antagonist. It's sort of similar to the action of the CB1 antagonist that was approved in Europe years ago, called Acomplia for metabolic syndrome. And unfortunately, it has to be pulled from the market because of side effects around depression and suicide. We have not seen any of this in our trial so far. We have over 150 patients in different studies that we studied so far, and long-term safety study up to 3 years, as well as short-term trials. And we have not seen any psychiatric, deleterious effects of that nature.
And the CBD is the one that calms your nerves.
Yeah.
Am I correct?
It does. It has a
It
very
has a
strong
calming effect across the board.
anti-anxiety effect, working on the serotonin receptors. So that's something else we will assess as well because of the anxiety and the obsession around food that we think CBD might help with as well. Direct effect on the appetite.
And if I can comment, so I think one of the concerns about using medical marijuana or some of the preparations sort of that are, floating around on the internet with, CBD is that they do have THC in them. And our kids are susceptible to psychosis and psychiatric problems, and potentially, those preparations, you could see where that might cause problems. My understanding is this preparation doesn't have any THC in it.
Exactly. Thank you, Teresa. This is 99.5% pure CBD, no THC whatsoever. So it's very safe from that aspect. Definitely don't want to give THC to somebody with, trying to lose weight, because it increases your appetite, as some of us may have experienced personally. The other thing I didn't mention is we are offering 11-month extension trial for CBD, so keep that in mind as well. The FDA filing, unfortunately, causes some interruption in treatment, but hopefully not too long.
Thank you so much. Oh, wow. That was a little loud, wasn't it? Thank you so much to all of our panelists who've come in today and shared a little bit about their trials. This is really exciting for all of our families. We've all been waiting for treatments, and now it's our turn. Now it is time. They've done the work. They've done the prep work. These studies are ready, and it's our turn to help get these studies enrolled. It's up to the parents to enroll these studies. And this is something that even if your child is not eligible for, you can help us with this work. You can talk about these studies on Facebook. When you're meeting up with parents in your community, you can talk to them about some of these opportunities that you've heard about today. So please do continue to help us to spread the word,